Thank you very much, Nick Mohammed, for having a chat with us here at 103.1 FM. It is honestly a pleasure to be able to speak with you for however short the time is, but just to get to know you a bit better and for the
Thank you.
audience to understand who Nick Mohammed is.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
First of all, who is Nick Mohammed? For those who may not be aware.
So I am a British comedian, an actor, and I write as well. And oh gosh, so I'm half Trinidadian. I think that's important to say right now. So my dad is from Trinidad and my mum is from Cyprus, and they met. I think at Leeds University is where they met in England, and which is where they still live now in Leeds, in the north of England. And yeah, I got into comedy through university. I sort of joined the sort of university sketch comedy group, and even though it's taken quite a while to sort of get to sort of doing stuff on television and on film. I started off doing live gigs, sort of doing the comedy circuit in London and stuff after I'd graduated, and yeah, sort of kind of it built up from there. But yeah, I've done a few bits and pieces now. Intelligence and Ted Lasso are the kind of the current shows that I'm doing, and pop up in the odd film here or there. But yeah, that in a nutshell is who Nick Mohammed is. I'm also a dad of two lovely kids and a husband to Becca, my lovely wife. Yeah, and also I should say we're trying to work out that we are, I think, third cousins or second cousins, but there is a family connection there as well, which is lovely.
I wanted to get into a little bit of how Trinidad and Tobago culture, if at all, has played a part in your life. Is there anything that you can remember, perhaps growing up as a child or even now?
Yeah, completely. I've been to Trinidad and Tobago only three times. And there were when I was younger. So the first time I went, I was really young. I was like 4 or 5, and obviously it was incredible. And I was in my primary school. I was the only. It was a very white school. I was the only mixed race person there. So it was a real kind of, not that I experienced sort of anything bad as a result of that, but I knew that it was a point of difference. And when we went on holiday in Trinidad, I remember distinctly having to do like a show and tell kind of talk about what it's like at Trinidad and Tobago, and funnily enough, my son Finn he's 5, and he did a show and tell at his school, and he interviewed my dad, who's from Trinidad, about what it's like in Trinidad and Tobago to do a kind of show and tell thing. But yeah, I remember that distinctly. I remember getting bitten by red ants. I remember my dad's sort of family home in San Fernando, and there being a banana tree. There was sort of quite distinct sort of childhood memories. And then I went again when I was a bit older, when I was 15, and then I think again when I was 16, because my dad was over a couple of times doing sort of some work with a football club over there. And but I haven't been sort of since I started studying at university and then sort of had a job. It was sort of more difficult to kind of go over. But I'm sure that I will go over again at some point and would love to, because obviously it's a beautiful place. But yeah, growing up, obviously my dad's, the influences in terms of stuff that I like to eat, stuff that we would cook, and my dad, even though I was very much born and raised in the UK, and we'll sit down and have like a Sunday roast, but we'll still have it with rice and hot pepper sauce. I mean, that is an absolute go-to that we will still do, and I think that's absolutely my dad's influence rather than anything British. There's nothing really that British about that. And the music that my dad would still listen to a lot of calypso and stuff in the car growing up in particular, and so yeah, it's still sort of part of me. I kind of can't wait to take the kids there, maybe when they're a little bit older. And it's a lovely place.
You mentioned Ted Lasso and Intelligence, which are two of your more recent projects. And as I was mentioning to you before we started, you were also the voice of Piglet in Christopher Robin, and you would have come quite a long way. So I just wanted you to give me a short history of where you would have started. And there's a bit of magic that might be involved in there somewhere as well.
So I kind of got into magic quite a lot when I was a kid, really. There's a quite well-known British magician, sadly no longer with us, died about 5 years ago now, I think, called Paul Daniels, and he used to have a Saturday night TV show on the BBC that I used to adore watching. It was the kind of telly that you'd sort of sit down and watch as a family, and he would he would host it and do some brilliant close-up magic and illusions and so on, but he'd also have a lot of international acts on, and I adored it. And that must have been when I was like 4 or 5 years old, and so I was really into, in the way that a lot of kids kind of get into magic. It's sort of a phase that they go through, but I guess I kept on at it, and I guess that's what gave me the sort of performing bug, really. And I worked, professionally, sort of semi-professionally as a magician on and off sort of through summer holidays. And it was how I kind of paid my way through university a little bit by doing some of the events and sort of parties and things like that go on there. And so I kind of sort of magic was sort of a way into then sort of starting doing comedy. So when I was at university, I then sort of started getting more involved in the comedy scene and doing little bits and pieces of stand-up. I tended to either use magic or sort of do a character to sort of hide behind. It was never sort of just pure stand-up with a microphone. There was always a bit of a gimmick there. But yeah, so after then I went to the Edinburgh Festival, which is a big arts festival that runs up in Edinburgh once a year in August, and had some interest from like a producer for Radio 4 called Caroline Raphael. And she kind of got it all started, really. And, there was no kind of guarantees with it. It was very much, she gave me her card and said, just stay in touch if you've got any ideas. And, eventually, I think then sort of maybe 2 or 3 years later, I got my own radio show, which was me sort of doing similar stuff to what I'd done on stage, doing kind of characters and sort of little sketches. And then that kind of grew bit by bit into doing little bits of telly for BBC and Channel 4. And then I guess sort of 5-6 years ago, I sort of started doing bits and pieces in film. So yeah, Christopher Robin was one of those. The Martian was another one. And a couple of British films like Bridget Jones's Baby, the more recent Bridget Jones film, and Absolutely Fabulous, the movie. And yeah, I just feel very fortunate. I was lucky enough that I would write quite a lot. So times when I wasn't acting, I would be writing. So whether it is something to do on stage or whether it is something that I would then pitch as a TV show, which is how Intelligence came about, which is a sitcom set in GCHQ, which is sort of the spy agency over here. It's like the NSA is in the States, basically. So yeah, but the last few years, I guess, has been where it's taken off. Sounds a bit sort of self-aggrandizing, but it's certainly been the busiest sort of the last few years with writing and starring in Intelligence, and then being cast in Ted Lasso, which is has sort of taken over the world a little bit. Ted Lasso, and I can't take any credit for that. It was just an audition that happened to go my way, and it's a lovely show to be involved in. But yeah, that's the sort of a potted history. And magic wise, I still very much do magic, and I'm a real hobbyist with it, still reading lots of magic books, but I tend to perform professionally as a magician a lot less, just because kind of comedy and acting has taken over. But I still occasionally will do the odd wedding or something. If it's a friend and they ask me to do something, I'll do something. But yeah.
Do you remember your first gig, whether it's comedy or magic, whatever gave you that performing bug? Do you remember the emotions that went along with it?
Yes, I do. It's quite specific. I mean, in terms of my first, I could hardly really call it a gig because I was still quite young. I think I was only 12 years old. But I remember at the church that my mum went to, and we would go quite a lot growing up, and particularly at Christmas we would go. And the vicar at the time, a guy called Richard Wiggin, he on Christmas Day, he would do this thing where he'd get all the kids and adults as well to kind of come out, and if they had like a present, sort of come and show and sort of talk about it and what it was. And I remember getting these what are they called? I think they're called the Chinese sticks. It's like a magic sort of thing where you sort of pull a string on one kind of wand thing, and the other one kind of goes up even though they're not connected, and you pull it on the other and it goes up. I've probably not described that very well, but if you want to look it up, it's called the Chinese sticks, or the pom-pom trick, maybe it's called. One of the two. Anyway, I remember doing that, and I remember Fran Needham, who ran like the guides, she said, "Oh, Nick should do like a little show at the church hall, for just as a thing to raise money for the church roof or something like that." And I remember distinctly doing that when I was either 11 or 12, and thinking that I absolutely loved it. And I don't really know how long this stage show like lasted. It might have lasted I remember there was an interval in it. Maybe it was like 2 half-hour things, and I did like 20 tricks in it or something. And I remember like a school teacher came to watch it, and my friends came to watch it. And I just, that was very, very key in terms of knowing that I guess was a bit of an attention seeker and quite liked the attention. So that was my first kind of informal gig. And then my first kind of proper paid gig, gosh, I think I do remember. I think it was at university, and someone had pulled, there was like a big sort of comedy festival thing happening at the university in Durham, and they had a compere, but he had to pull out last minute. And I'd auditioned to be in one of the university sketch groups, the Durham Review, at the time, and had not got in, but they'd sort of stayed in touch, and they said, "Oh, could you do a last minute favor? Could you come and compare this gig? And you can sort of do anything you want." So I did a mix of magic and some bits and pieces of stand up, but because it was a proper kind of university event, and they were charging tickets price, there was a fee. I can't remember what it was, and I remember having to go and collect my fee, like a check. So that was my first gig, and I think it went all right. It was then downhill for a while after that, and then before I kind of built up my confidence again, because student gigs are kind of different to I guess sort of real gigs. But that was my sort of first memories of gigging. But yeah, both very informative, and it went, I guess, well enough, or there was enough there to make me think, oh, I want to do it again.
And you have continued in the world of the arts. You have gone from that point now to being part of a cast of a multiple Emmy-nominated show, and of course being Ted Lasso. And between then and now, and to this point in your career, what would you consider to be, if you can call three of your favorite moments so far?
I mean, I guess Ted Lasso, professionally speaking, otherwise my wife will be furious that I don't say marriage and the birth of our two children. They're the three. But if it's professional things, I think The Martian was one of them, getting to do The Martian, because it was one of the first feature films that I'd done, and it was something that I had to audition for. And this was I think I auditioned for it back in 2014. So it was a few years ago, and it came out maybe a year or so after that. And it was an American accent. So I'd never done an audition or done anything in an American accent. So I'd had like lessons. So I remember kind of working quite hard. And obviously I was a huge Ridley Scott fan, and remember thinking, oh God, this would be amazing if I got it, but I probably won't get it. And it was one of those where I auditioned and then I got a recall, and kind of the closer you get to kind of getting the job, the more you want. So psychologically, it's almost like the more that you then really want it. But I didn't want to get my hopes up. But yeah, when that kind of turned out good, I was delighted and then terrified of doing the job, because I felt completely out of my depth. So that was a real highlight. There's a show that I did called Houdini in 2016. And we did it again in 2017 in London, which was really fun. It was a character I do often live called Mr. Swallow, trying to do like a musical biopic about Houdini's life, which ends with doing the famous water torture escape. And that was a really fun show, and it had been well received. So that was lovely. And then, yeah, I guess, Intelligence and Ted Lasso, I guess they're both, Intelligence, getting to work with David Schwimmer and a lovely ensemble cast, and it's the first thing that I've just written all on my own as a TV series, and that felt pretty special. It's hard work and it's quite intense because I write it and then I'm in it, so I'm sort of wearing two different hats whilst sort of making that show, and I'm an exec on the show as well. So sometimes it's sort of it can be hard work and fun, challenging work, but it does, it takes its time, that show. And then Ted Lasso's a different kind of show in that respect, because it was an audition in the way that The Martian was the audition that I got lucky with it and it turned my way, and I get to just show up to work and act rather than have to worry about any of the writing or any of the production aspects of it. And I'm very lucky that show has done wonderfully, and yeah, the Emmy nominations thing is kind of crazy and bonkers, and I mean, who knows whether there'll be a real in-person ceremony. I hope so, but I don't know, with COVID and everything, who knows whether they'll be able to run it. But yeah, so I would say those are the four that would be the highlights, I think.
So you mentioned all of the auditions, and that's one of the more terrifying parts, I would assume, having to do auditions and then wait for the phone call to find out if you've gotten a call back or if you've even gotten the gig. So I want you just to talk to those who may be in the arts here in Trinidad and Tobago, actors or theatre actors, who may be, going through that sort of time in their life where they're doing auditions and perhaps things haven't quite gone well just yet. what advice would you give, as brief as you could, to persons who are in that position?
I think that the thing I try to tell myself, and still tell myself, is that the casting or the audition is that's the thing to get right. And if you have sort of really done your best and you've prepared for it and you know the words and you really give it your all in the audition room, in the casting, that's all you can do, because there can be 100 reasons why you don't get the part. It could be because they've already cast someone who looks a bit like you, or they are actually gonna go in a slightly different direction with this character, but they still thought that you were very good. So there can be lots of reasons which are completely out of your control as to why you might not get a part. So it's, I guess, kind of trying to sort of separate sort of psychologically yourself from the process a little bit, and just try and focus all your energy into doing as best as you can in the room. Because even if getting the job, of course, is the icing on the cake, and a lot of the time that's really what you want because it'd be good for your profile and it pays the bills and things like that. But actually, it's as much a useful thing to just do your best in the room, even if you don't get the part, because often a casting director or a producer or whoever else is sort of the other side of the table, they'll remember you. And I haven't been the other side of the table for many things, but I have for intelligence. And I know just from that small experience that there were definitely people who came in the room and were absolutely fantastic and brilliant, who we've remembered for series 2. If they didn't get the part for series 1, we've then specifically approached them for series 2 because we knew how good they were at doing something, and we've either written a part for them in series 2 or we've got them back because we knew that we liked them. So it's as much about, I think, preparation and trying to go in with a positive attitude. And even if it doesn't go your way at the very, very end, knowing that you've done your best it should be the feeling that you kind of go after, because that's all you can do. And often that will reap benefits in the future, and people will remember you for that.
So, no pun intended, I see you're wearing a hat today, but you do wear many hats in terms of your career. As you mentioned, you write, you're also on screen, you're behind the screen, you're into magic. I read somewhere as well that you're also into the violin, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. Yeah.
So with all of these things in mind, considering all of these things, had you not followed through into the world of the arts, specifically in terms of what you're doing now, what do you think your career path might have been?
Well, I was headed towards, so I did my degree at Durham was in geophysical sciences. And so that's kind of earthquakes and seismology and things like that. And then I'd actually started doing a PhD in seismology at Cambridge, which I eventually cut short to an MPhil. So I kind of would have possibly carried on pursuing academia, maybe ended up working for an oil company, using the geophysics in some kind of way. I mean, there was a time, my mum retired now, but was a GP. And there was a time when I thought, oh, maybe I'll switch to medicine. I might switch sort of courses and maybe do medicine. So maybe I'd ended up being a doctor, maybe possibly. But I feel very lucky. I worked at an investment bank for a while when I first moved to London. I knew I wanted to do comedy, but obviously couldn't afford to live off it in the first instance because I was sort of gigging and sometimes getting paid, sometimes not. And so I had to. I was temping in the day at an investment bank, but I don't know if I would have necessarily stuck there. I wasn't as into sort of finance and all that. But yeah, maybe a doctor or oil company. I think that's probably where it was heading. Something a bit sciencey or academic-y like that, I think.
As we wrap up, is there anything that you'd like to say to your TNT audience, those who may have been following you over the years and those who may start following you from today? Who knows?
I should do a shout out to my family who are out there. Shout out to Auntie Frida. Actually, I think, is Auntie Frida in the States or is she in Trinidad? I should find out. But yeah, I mean, listen, if anyone is following my work, thank you very much. I can highly recommend Ted Lasso. As you say, it's a very feel-good a very good feel-good TV series, and second series is about to start on Friday, the 23rd of July. So do look out for that if you can. And yeah, and if you, I guess, for anyone who is pursuing a career or thinking of pursuing a career in acting or writing or the arts in general, then I guess my sort of final words not words of wisdom, but any kind of advice I can impart is to absolutely, not give up hope, because it is difficult and it can be a bit of a roller coaster, but it is one of the most rewarding things, one of the most kind of crazy jobs you can do, but equally rewarding as it is unpredictable. And I count myself very lucky to have worked certainly these past few years, but it's deeply satisfying, and I'm very grateful for any audience who either watches the TV shows or has followed my career or live work or anything like that. So thank you.
And thank you, Nick, for having a chat with us. With all that has happened so far over the past few months, especially with the Emmy nominations, you would be a very busy man. So I appreciate you taking time out to have a chat with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and hopefully do it again another time.
Yeah, this is an interview with Nick Mohammed. Check out Ted Lasso, check out Intelligence. He was also in Christopher Robin, as he mentioned before as well. He was also in The Martian, and a lot of other TV series / movies / works of art that I'm sure we'd all like to see at this point in time. Thanks again, Nick.
Thank you very much. Thank you.